And besides getting a job, another big dream for many people interested in game development is, of course, having their own indie games on an app store,
Oh
for
yeah.
example.
Hmm.
This seems very appealing because then you can create the whole thing by yourself, and you not only create a small part of the game, but you create the whole game with the story and everything. And what do you think about the mobile indie market? How realistic is it for someone to actually make sufficient income to survive from it by creating their very own indie games? What do you think about that?
Oh, I think. I mean, it's always hit or miss. You always. But having said that, if you're gonna make a game and you want to make money, especially on mobile, you're gonna go for like the casual indie game market, which is basically games that you can play on, on your ride to work. It's not something that you need to have a story for. It's not really anything that you need, to be involved with, but it's challenging enough that someone will still pay attention while they're doing something monotonous, like they did being on a train or something going to work. Indie games in like larger content, like larger indie games that are like fully featured and have story and all this, it's a lot easier now to make them. I'll say that, like, you can cross publish to like PlayStation and Xbox and all that stuff from Unity, even if you wanted to. Everything's a lot more accessible nowadays, but um, I don't think that's.
It's definitely difficult to build a really good
Yeah,
game because you have to do more stuff than just writing code. You need graphics and
exactly.
sounds and a story and everything. But yeah, some smaller casual games, I could imagine building them.
Yeah, especially on mobile, like that's a big market. Like you might have to make a lot of them to like get a hit and to get enough experience to see what people actually want to play. But the casual gaming market is still pretty open for indie developers.
And if someone wanted to build a bigger game with a story and everything, and they have the patience for it, first of all, I want to say they should probably make sure that it's something that they enjoy the process because they can't be
Oh yeah.
guaranteed that they actually have success with that. So if you like doing that, then that's something they can try out. But how would you go about finding graphics and sounds and stuff like that? Would you try to hire someone? Would you go to Fiverr, or how would you do that? Because just want to say it's completely different from coding, right? Coding is just
Oh
one
yeah.
part, but you also need these assets and everything.
Oh yeah. There. So like programming, design, audio, art. Those are usually the four main pillars that you would either specialize in your career or specialize in school. You can do some of those, still being a programmer. I don't have, sometimes you just do need an artist or art assets and you can't do it yourself. Unity is a great, like the Unity Asset Store, great place to go. Free assets everywhere. And like the paid assets start at, kind of nothing, and you get the rights to publish and whatever. So there's no licensing or anything. There's no issues once you publish. If you wanted something more custom, I don't know. I would still look for conventional artists that have 3D experience. I mean, these are just. I find that the best relationships and the best kind of people that you find are through like enjoying their work. So if there are games that you like, find out who did the art. Like it's really that simple. Like if you like assets on the Unity Asset Store, but they're not quite what you want, like email the artist, email the publisher. Like, can you make something custom for me? There's no harm in asking and like admiring or asking people that you admire, like, are you available for work? Maybe they won't be, maybe they will be. But there's definitely a large community around game development. Like, and you don't need, like I said, you can do all of this, for free or to nothing to a certain level. Like, you're not going to get, something, crazy like AAA games have, but you can do this. Like, it's possible to do this for very little money.
Yeah, I've actually seen some dev vlogs on YouTube where people build games and they create all these assets by themselves. Usually this is pixel
Oh
art
yeah.
because pixel art is something you can learn relatively easy. And you can even
Hmm.
make your own sounds. There are tutorials for that, how to create sounds with your mouth, for example, and they sound like game
Yeah.
sounds then. So it is possible to do this by yourself.
Oh yeah. And like like you said, there are tutorials on Blender for for Maya or 3D Max or the core 3D modeling programs. And there are tons of YouTube videos about how to make simple assets. Like it's very learnable.
Yeah, I've also built some models with Blender. So that's something you can learn.
Yeah, it's perfectly learnable if you want to. But if you're like, that you like programming and, you make some connections and find some like-minded people that have other skills, like use that. That's how this all works.
One thing that's still left then is writing a compelling story, depending on the style of the game. Do you have any tips for that? Does it maybe help if people, it probably helps if people play a lot of games themselves, so they get an idea for that and also game mechanics.
It does.
But what about, for example, reading books? Does reading fantasy books help you with building a good game story?
I don't think it's necessarily, like, they will help you because it's creative and it's imaginative. I don't necessarily think that a style of book is going to help. It's kind of like being a screenwriter, I would imagine. Like, if you read, kind of core books around what makes stories good and like why, human psychology likes certain parts of stories, and you definitely need to read about like user engagement and like how people really play games, because game stories, while the big studios, they're kind of like movies, like you kind of just play them and it's really cool and there's cutscenes and all that stuff. If you're making a game that doesn't necessarily have that, you really do need to understand what drives humans to enjoy your product. And that's out there. Like there's a ton of books about like how to write engaging stories, how to write narratives, how to, keep your readers or your players engaged in what you're doing, how to keep them coming back, what kind of core mechanics that are playable make games really kind of addictive in a good way, not in a bad way. But like everything, when you watch a movie, everything, games are kind of, in my mind, like when you're writing a game, you want to think about like what parts of your favorite movie would you want to play and why? Because that's really where your engagement is. Like the static, non-interactable movie if it's captured you that much, like what if you could play it? Like what would you do?
That seems like a good approach. I've also I've not read real books about game design, but I've read some gamification books. Gamification, I know that you have some experience with that. I saw that on your LinkedIn. I was interested in this topic because gamification is when you apply game mechanics to real life stuff, right? I was interested to gamify my personal to-do lists and stuff like that. So this is why I read some books about this. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that you need some knowledge about game design to make your game interesting. You can't do that intuitively usually, because you need to understand a little bit about human psychology and what keeps them motivated. But it can all be learned, as you already said.
Oh yeah. Again, like this is all stuff that is accessible at a basic level, and if you want to go farther, you can. But all this information is, once you start reading about it, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense because I do that. Like it's very easy to quantify and sort of check off like, oh, this makes sense because I'm a human and I know that I have done that. Like I know that that's how I have responded.
One other thing I wanted to mention is that I've already talked, or I've briefly mentioned dev logs before, that some people do. They create games and they document the process by creating these summaries on YouTube. And I just want to mention, for people who watch this and who want to build their own indie games, this is a great way of marketing. So instead of just sitting down at home and building it all by yourself, it's a really good way of marketing your game and creating interest by creating these devlogs on YouTube. I'm a big fan of them, and I think they are really smart, really good way of creating some hype around your game and actually getting sales then. This is just something I want to mention because many people make the mistake that they just sit at home, do this, and they hope one day when it's finished, they bring it out and people buy it. But this is usually not how it works. Marketing is important.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you don't have to give away your whole game, but especially if you are saying, well, you've already tested it at home and you're like, well, I'm going to show you how I built my enemy mechanic from the ground up, like just a small piece, and then you can link them to your bigger GitHub project or whatever you want to do. There's definitely, like you said, the marketing of it, but also the engagement from the community and sort of passing on what you learn is very important.
And I really enjoy watching these devlogs. They can be super interesting, seeing how someone builds the game. And then just because you watch this, you can become a fan, and then you are suddenly interested in this game, even though you would have never found it in another way.
Exactly. And everyone kind of, programming, even though, it's like anything else creative, even though the rules and the language are set, everyone sort of approaches it a different way. So like you said, it's very easy to watch these and be like, wow, it never would have occurred to me to, make it like that, but that's cool and it works.